that's really necessary. It was about 2 minutes long. Okay, so here's the News API, and so here is my account. When you get your account, they will give you your own API key, so I don't mind showing you mine. This is it, but use your own, right? So you want to grab this, whatever it is, and copy it, and just create a plain text document.
Are you sharing your screen?
Oh, thank you. Much appreciated. All right, there we go. All right, so this is what I'm looking at here. I know. So your API key, once you log in, it should give you this. So it's this big long string. It's not going to be duplicated by any other user. And this is basically your authentication, right? In order to grab the data, you need to send your API key to them, and then they will say, okay, this person's legit. We're going to go ahead and send them the data here. So you want to grab this and copy it. Now, all the examples that you see in here will have your API key inserted into them, which is kind of cool. That's only if you're logged in. But you want to go ahead and just put this into a comment in your JavaScript or something like that. I think for clarity's sake, I'm going to, like this has the gallery.html. I think I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the gallery.html yet again, or maybe I'll just put it into index. I'll do that because I'm not using index for anything else. So I'm going to go to my index.html, and once again, I'll get rid of everything inside the main element, just like I did for the gallery. And then comment this out again so it doesn't cause me any problems. And then again, I'll do this in page, although you wouldn't want to do this in your project. You'd want to do an outboard JavaScript file, but for now, I'll just go ahead and put a script element inside of here. And then just, make yourself either a single line comment or a multi-line comment and paste in your API key. And if there's any question that you will forget what this thing is, API key, and then just go ahead and paste it in there just so you've got it. You don't forget what it is, and you don't have to keep checking back with the NewsAPI website in order to find out what the heck it is. So there we go, there's that, and then once you've got that, go back to the home page. And there's a couple of places that you can go to in order to figure out what you're doing with this API. One of which, and the first place that I would think of going, is documentation. And this is going to have a lot of details about the kind of things that you can accomplish in here. And actually, it's going to be simpler to go to the get started. So whatever API you choose, hopefully they will have some combination of those two pages, documentation, and if you're lucky, maybe just like a get started page, because that's usually the easiest way to get started. So this one in particular has a little sandbox area over here, and it's got different examples in these different languages. And look, they've got one for JavaScript. So if you tap on JavaScript there, and so you have to scroll down a little bit, and it'll give you some example requests and so on, and the response that you can expect to get from these. So what you could do is you could take this like example, and this is the first thing I'm going to do. I'll delete it again immediately. But I'm just going to take this whole thing underneath the example request under, make sure you're in the JavaScript section here, and grab this guy right here and copy it. And let's go ahead and just paste it right into, I'm not going to paste it into my file, I'm just going to paste it into the console. So here I am, I've still got the server going, and I'm going to go back to my index.html because that's what I'm working with. And then just paste it right in here. And just see if it works. Just go ahead and hit enter, and it should give you a promise or two, and then it's still pending, so it's thinking about it. And oh, the problem is that I don't have, oh yeah, I do. It put my API key in here, so I was forgetting about that. it should put your own API key in as soon as you check out any of the examples here. But okay, here it is. So now the promise state is fulfilled, and now I should be able to open up this object, and there it is. So there's a bunch of things here. So I'm getting something in. So it should be working for you too. Is there anyone who was not getting back an object down here? If you go to the promise result and open it up, you should be able to get an object. And actually give me an array of 0 articles. I'm not sure why it did that. I don't know. Well, okay. I've got some kind of response from it anyway, but I'm just kind of surprised it only has, let me check. Oh, I think I know what it is, maybe. Okay, that's okay. So let's go ahead and make our own example here. I'm just going to refresh that and get rid of it. So now I'm going to go back to my index.html or whatever file that you're using, and let's go ahead and build a fetch. So having looked at some of the documentation in here, I have an idea about what to look for. It's going to be a fetch, and like before, well, I don't have it on this page, here it is. In this case, we were fetching from a local file here, but in this case, we're going to be fetching from NewsAPI.org. So we need to put in HTTP. I don't think we need an S on there. NewsAPI.org. And unlike what I'm doing right here, don't forget to put it into a string. And just to match like what they're doing, let's go ahead and do it their way here so that we will be doing some concatenation. Not because we need to, it's just going to be one big long string, but just so we can put it onto multiple lines, it's going to be a little easier to understand. And you know what? Forget it. Let's not do that. We're just going to do it inside a single pair of strings. We'll do it as one big long line. So it's going to get a little bit long here, but that's okay. So newsapi.org. Basically what you're going to do here is you start putting in parameters with question marks and ampersands once you get to the point where you're asking for something for specific. But actually, now that I think about it, there's more that we need to put in here. So newsapi.org, and then v2 is what we're doing, the version 2. And then let's look up top headlines. So in order to get this, this is what I was talking about. We need to put in a question mark. So whenever you see a question mark in a URL, that means it's going to be putting in, it's like putting in parameters to a function, basically. And then those parameters, instead of being separated by commas, well, sometimes they are separated by commas, but usually they're separated by an ampersand instead. So in this case, I'm just going to put in API key equals, and then I'm going to copy and paste my API key into here. Now this might look a little bit weird because if you're used to doing markup, you might think, oh, this is an equals, I need to put quotes in here. Don't put any quotes, right? This whole thing is one quote, and it knows that an equal sign means we've got a property of value pair here. There's no need to put quotes around. So this is all just one string in one pair of quotes here. I don't know if it's gonna it may insist that I do look for top headlines or for a particular query or something like that. But let's go ahead and just try it like this to start with. So then we'll build the rest of the fetch structure. So this is going to be a .then, and then just like before, response. I told you this line was going to get a little long. There we go. And then this is also going to be JSON, right? Let's check it here. Yes, response.json. So we know that we're giving it to us in JSON format, which is what, like I said, almost everybody does these days. So then response, and then we will do response.json method, and another .then, and then data, and then pass that variable into another function. So this is the same structure as before. If you wanted to, you could cut or copy and paste the last fetch statement we did and just replace like the js/gallery.json with this guy right here, including your own API key. But otherwise, it's the same structure. I'll leave it up there for just a moment for you guys. There we go. I can't even remember how to code the entire Ajax thing in vanilla JavaScript anymore. I used to code it, but it was so long and messy that I just had it like as a boilerplate file that I would just copy and paste from because it was really messy. I can't tell you how clean this is in comparison. One of the big draws to using jQuery back in the day is that they had just like they had an Ajax method, and it was just way simpler to do than it was in vanilla JavaScript. But this is one of the things that has made jQuery, if not irrelevant, like certainly something that you would hesitate before using a new project at this point. Because a lot of the stuff that made jQuery so attractive back in the day is now done in vanilla JavaScript, because JavaScript has just come forward in leaps and bounds since that time. Plus, the browsers have much more gotten on the same page in terms of implementation of JavaScript features, which they were not back in the day. That was another big draw of using jQuery back in the day, is that it made you not have to worry quite so much about making things work in Internet Explorer or whatever, because they handled that on the back end of the jQuery. Okay, so this is what we're, and I remember what we did before. First of all, we just console.log the data, and that was it, just to see if we were getting something. And that's going to be our first step. And then once we've done that, we will do a simple loop and loop through whatever they give us, and then figure out what properties are available to us that we can use. So first of all, let's go ahead and just do console.log data and see what we get. So this is the index.html. And status error, parameters missing, required parameters are missing. Yeah, so this is what so what I've basically done, I was half expecting this. What I've done is I've said, give me all of your top headlines. Give them to me. Give them all. And it's saying, no, that's too much stuff. Okay, we don't want to have to spit out that much data for everybody. So they're asking for something that's a little bit more particular. So I'm going to, after this question mark, I'm going to put in a parameter. And the simplest one that I know of from NewsAPI.org is setting the country. So after the question mark, type in country equals US, or a different country if you're more interested in that. And now we have two parameters. We have to separate these parameters. There's country equals US, and then there's API key equals, and then this big mess. And the way you separate these out usually is with an ampersand. Like I said, I've occasionally seen a comma, but usually this is the way you see it. Almost always, actually. So let's see if that'll do it. So I'm going to save that and go over here. And now, okay, status okay, cool. It's giving me 36 results instead of like however many thousands I would have gotten before. And it's, okay, it's giving me, it's an array. So let's drop this down and see if this is right. So here's what it is. So this is, let's go ahead and try it one way, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to work. In fact, I know it's not going to work. Let's just go ahead and try looping through data and seeing what happens. So just like we did before, right? So we did, let me go back over here. So we commented out console.log data, which is what we just did. And then we did either a for of or a for each loop, and just looped right through like we did let L of data. So let's go ahead and try it again, like just like that. So I will do for let L of data, exactly what we did before, console.log L, right? Go ahead and try that, or the for each one if you prefer that, and then just see what you get in the console there. What'd you guys get? I'm getting an error. Did you guys get the same thing? Did you get an error? Is anybody running through this with me?
I'm just typing everything, but I probably
Okay.
messed some stuff up and we'll fix it after.
Yeah, let me know if you want me to leave this up longer.
Mine's just stating all the titles and descriptions.
I think you're still looping through the gallery.json file.
Okay, I need to comment it out. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I jumped to a different document here, just to keep things separate. So instead of doing fetch js/gallery.json, this is what you need to have in that first parameter for the fetch function. This, except your own API key. Does anyone need help? Want me to pause and help you guys out? You guys are being awfully quiet tonight. Okay, well, I'm going to uncomment this console.log data. When you get this happening, when you're trying to loop through your data and you're getting an error, uncomment this original one. This is part of the point of doing it. It's not just so that you can see if something's happening at all, but if something else happens down here that you're not expecting, then you can go back and see what's going on. So I'm going to save this and go back over here. And here's the type error that I'm getting. But here's the status OK error. So let me drop this down and see what's happening. So what it's got here, it's saying this is an array of 20, but it's putting the word articles before that. So it's articles : array 20. So this is actually like an object. So let me show you what I mean. This guy right here, the gallery.json that we did for the first example, this is the way a lot of JSON files look. Like it just contains an array, literal, or an object literal or something like that. But it's also possible to do something like this and put a colon as if this is all part of an object, even though I'm not surrounding it with the curly braces. Although now I can't remember if it has to be surrounded by the curly braces or not. But in any case, it could be something like this, where there's less like a name for everything that follows. And that's what's happening here. In the data that they're sending us, it's not just the array of 20 items. It's like articles as a property name, and then the array is the value for that property name, like it's in an object, which I guess it is. So here's what's going to work for us. Instead of just saying for let L of data, let's say for let L of data dot articles. And that's what's going to grab the array instead of just the item itself. So we'll be looping through the value of the articles property. And this one should do it. And there we go. Now it's looping through them and giving us some decent results that we can then open and take a further look at. So I'm going to comment this out again. And I wanted to show you this because some JSON files do this. And so when you run into an error, this is probably the first thing that I would try to, especially if it gives you an error like, yeah, this thing is not iterable. I don't know what you're trying to do with this for of loop. Try this. Go back to your console.log data and take a look at it. It might be something like this, where you can't loop directly through the data, but you need to loop through a property of the data. In this case, that's what's happening. So as you know, the next thing that you do is to take one of these, iterate it through, and crack it open and see what we got. So drop down here, these are the properties that we have to work with. So each of these news articles, because that's what NewsAPI does, right, has an author or a couple of authors. Those of you who have done database design will know that this is not a good way to store this kind of data. It really should be, what's the word for it? Well, it should be scalar, basically. Content. So this is the entire article is contained within the content here. The description is like a short, like an abstract of the article. It's got a timestamp for the published date. The source, here's where it's, and this one's got an object on it. And then the title, of course, and then the URL where this article can be found. Have like a more after the jump to whatever link for users to click on. And then the URL to image. So if it's got an image associated with that particular article, then it will be stored at this URL. So the ones that I'm going to be using here I'm going to want, well, I definitely want the image. I want the URL to image. And I want to provide a link so that users can get to the full article. I want the title and probably the description. And that's probably it for right now. So let's try getting those 4 things. So description, title, URL, and the URL to image. So if you need to, go ahead and put those in a comment as well. So let's see here. Let's see, title, URL, description, and URL to image. Something like that. It's a good idea just to kind of organize your thoughts about, yeah, these are the pieces that I'm trying to get from here. And then we'll comment this out, and we will try doing our template like we did before. So again, I'm going to grab the main element, so I'm going to do that right inside the fetch. Oops. Come on out. Inside the fetch call, do like a let main equal document query selector main, like so. Other than that, like if you wanted to, you could totally go in here and say document.query selector main and then dot like HTML plus equals. But I think it's just kind of easier to split it out like this. So main.innerHTML plus equals, and then we'll use the backticks to create our template literal. And let's start with a heading of some sort. So I will start with maybe an H1 here. Just like we did the H4, right, for the gallery. So we'll do an H1 here and an interpolated value, and we're going to look for L.title and see if we can get that to work. So just like this, just to start with, excuse me, it's a good idea just to before coding it all in, just to see if you can get something looping on the page. I should be able to get 20 titles onto the HTML document page. I'm going to save this and go over here, and there we go. There are my 20 articles. Top headlines, country equals US. And like before, last time we did a figure to contain each of those gallery elements, which is an appropriate semantic HTML5 element. Let's do article this time. So I'll do an article up here and then closing /article closing tag here. which right away it takes the H1s and makes them smaller. And this is like yet another thing that we don't have time to go into, but an article is what's called a sectioning element, which means that if you put an H1 in here, it's considered to be an H1 for that element and not for the whole page. And yeah, it's more complicated than that, but that's basically what it means. But that's why, without applying any CSS, just putting an H1 inside an article can change the way that the browser is interpreting the style of that H1. And let's see, I think we'll put the image before anything so that if we want to, we can float it left or right. So this is going to be an image, source equals, and then all images also need an alt tag, as you guys know. So we've got a URL to image here that we'll use for the images. So source equals, but you can't just paste it in there, remember. I can't copy this and just paste it in there. It won't know what to do with it. Instead, I need to interpolate it, so the dollar and then curly braces, paste it into there. And then, I don't know what we should put in for the alt tag. I guess the description is the best thing that we've got here. Maybe probably the title, actually. The title would probably make more sense. The description might be a little long for an alt tag. So copy that, throw it in here with an interpolation, not percentage, but dollar. Some scripting languages use the percentages, like Ruby. URL to image is not defined, and that's because I need to put in, these are properties of the L variable that's being looped through here. I was forgetting that. So L.URL to image and L.title. See how useful console is? It catches you when you biff it. There we go. So there's an image, and there is headline, image, headline, image, headline, and so on. Now it's pulling these images from all over the place. NewsAPI.org does not do any work as far as like trying to normalize the size of images or the resolution or quality of images or anything like that. So you'll get like images of all different sizes, and occasionally you'll get an article that just doesn't have an image at all. And so that's what's happening with those. And I probably, if that's the case, I should be doing a little bit more work here. I should be doing like, like do a conditional and say like if URL to image, then put it in here, and if not, don't even include an image tag, whatever. But I'm not going to be that complicated with it right now. But yeah, it depends on how far down the rabbit hole you want to go. But yeah, I've been look through this data. If there's some cases where I'm not getting the data that I'm expecting, like an image, then you'll want to do some kind of a condition. We basically want to plan for it. So like what to do for a particular article entry if it doesn't have an image. And there's some other stuff that go missing. I can't remember if it's the author or something like that, but or the description. Sometimes there's something else that goes missing. I can't remember exactly what. Okay, so we've got the image and we've got the H1. Let's put a paragraph in here. And we will interpolate the value of L.description. And then test it in the browser. Image, title, description. Very good. It's getting truncated here. It's too long. And then we have to give people a link, right? So if they read this much and they say, hey, wait, where's the rest of the article? I want to read more. We'll give them a link to jump to the actual article so they can read the whole thing. So I'll put another paragraph down here. And let's put an A, href equals, and I'm going to put a target equals underscore blank. Does anybody remember what that does from the web technologies class?
It opens a new tab for the link.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it opens up a new tab or a new window when the user clicks on it, which is exactly what we want. We don't want to take people away from our app. We want them to follow a link and then close it and then find themselves right back where they started. I personally get irritated when I follow an external link, something that's clearly should open up in a new tab, and then thinking that it has, I close the window and I get closed out of the whole app that I was in before that. Users don't like that. And I think, let's see, the URL, I'm going to check this again. I'm going to save this, and actually, let me uncomment this again because I feel like I'm missing a little something. I don't think that URLs would be quite enough. Let me see here. Okay, so yeah, that's right. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that instead of just having like the whole URL visible on the page, I want to do a link where this is the hyperreference of the link, but then I have a shorter piece of text there for users to tap on. So that's why I was thinking I was missing something, and I think that here underneath source and then name, I'll do that. Let me check. Why is it giving me the full thing here? Yeah, I commented out the wrong, or uncommented the wrong one. Let me comment this out. That'll make things a little easier. There we go. So source, so the other one said like AP News, I think. This one says CBS Sports underneath source.name. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So the URL, that's fine. We'll use that for inside the hyperreference here. So this will be interpolated value of L dot URL. But then for the actual text, I want to use source.name. So this is, like, source is another object, right? If we collapse that, it shows it in object literal format. So these guys are just straight up just property and string value, property and string value. But this one is property and object value, which means the value I can call in as a regular property value. So like source.id or source.name. So let's do that. I'm going to do l.source. Is that right? .name, like that. Let's see if that works. I think that's going to do it. So here we go, and yes, that one is the link that says Associated Press. When I tap on it, it should open up in a new tab and take me to the full article. Let's try the next one. This one here is NDTV News, whatever that is. And yes, these are working. BBC News, one more. Okay, cool. So that's working. I've been seeing something that's just been bugging me here. I kind of use L just to mean element, and I tend to use that very generically. I'll use that for, like in this case, it stands for like array elements in an array, and if I use it when looping through like a node list or something, then it means like elements, like document elements, HTML elements. But if you want to do something more descriptive here for your own coding style, I think this would actually make the most sense in this case. I don't think it made sense here to use anything other than, it would have been like datum of data, which is just too goofy, right? But article of data.articles, I think makes perfect sense. So if you wanted to, you could leave it as L. Oh, I have to change these guys here. But then if you do, then you have to change it for all these guys too. So you might want to just leave yours alone. But I'm going to fix mine because I'm going to like this better. And ultimately, you have to stare at your own code all day, right? So you might as well do what you can to make it at least painful as possible. And then I will go to the browser and make sure I didn't break anything. Nope, looks like it's working still. I'll go to this one and just try one more link, and huzzah, everything's doing it. So here's what I wound up with. Let's see if I can make this a little wider. I don't want to make the text any smaller, if I can help it. So I'm having to go back and forth for this top line here, but even so, I'm thinking that it's probably easier just to do it as one line. The example from the NewsAPI.org split this up onto several lines, so you can do it that way too. Like this guy right here, where it says var ul equals, and then you see how it's like using concatenation to split this up, but it's doing the same thing. It's got the NewsAPI.org, and then like the first parameter here, and then it's splitting those up and doing other parameters there. So if you feel like doing it that way instead, then you can. So let's try something else. If you want to do a more specific query, which if anybody here is doing the News API, you will definitely want to do something more specific than just top headlines, right? So in this case, instead of doing top headlines, and let's see, maybe I'll comment out this line. Oh no, I'll just go ahead and change it. I can always get it back again. So I'll change top headlines to everything. And then instead of like country equals US, I will do like Q for query equals, and then whatever it is that I want to know about. So let's say technology, right? So I want to know everything about technology instead of just the top headlines from the US, and then it will give me different headlines, right? So here's some technology headlines, the top most. And there are other things that you can put in there, like sort by. So you could put another ampersand here.
Would this work with Twitter?
Something like it will work with Twitter. It's not going to be exactly this, but you should be able to grab data in via I know that they've got a public API, as does Facebook, and I'm sure Instagram does. I know that, well, Reddit has a very simple one if you don't want to pay. They've got a much better one. You have to pay through the nose if you want to use it. Let's see. So what was I thinking? Sort by equals popularity. And it'll give you a different sort for it. There it goes. And so on. Let's see what else. There's also a from. Like you can do and from equals, but this one's dangerous. You can only do it like within the last month, I think. And then once it like dates out of that and becomes, you know, what you coded in here becomes older than a month, then it will just like break the page, which is, I don't find that very helpful personally. You would have to write a separate script to continue updating the timestamp so that every time a user landed here, it would get a different date inserted here that's only like a month past from whatever the current, like today's date is. So I personally wouldn't mess with that, but go ahead, and if you want to use this one, check out the documentation on the NewsAPI.org page, and you know, you'll be able to find other stuff that you can do with it, other parameters that you can enter in here. Sort by should be sort by. That's why I was having a struggle with it before. Sort by. There we go. Yeah, it's still taking its time with that one. I guess it slowed it way down when I put that in there, didn't it? So I don't know if you want to do that or not. But anyway, it's all possible. So let's just take a quick look here. I'm just going to do Twitter API documentation. Subscribe to Pro Access. No thanks. And let's see, so here's the documentation and getting started. So find and retrieve tweets, users, spaces, direct messages. I'm kind of surprised about that one. And then let's see, tools and libraries. Okay, I want to find examples here. Where's an example? Sometimes it can take a bit of work to find like what you're looking for, like how to get started. I know that some of these places, they're I don't know, they're well-meaning, right, in setting up all the documentation, but so often documentation is just hard to figure out at first. But I'm starting to see some stuff here that's starting to like give me an idea about what an API call might look like at least. But you know from what we just did that you're going to need an API key from these guys, right? So that you can actually authenticate and get the data that you need to from them. Here's an example. Okay, so this is in Bash though. So here is what so you can see this is in JSON format. So when you get a result back from a tweet, this is what it would look like. There will be an ID, a public metrics object, and then there's the text of the tweet, and that'll all be within a data object, which let's see, it's an object, so you'd want to use a for in loop to get your way through there. And these are all Bash examples. Let me see here. Your API JavaScript example. JavaScript API, docs from the Twitter platform, JavaScript interfaces, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if it's setting up Twitter for websites, loading and initialization. So, okay, so this is to load the widgets. And so a lot of the times an API will include stuff like this, which is not so much for retrieving data for them, but it's to set up these widgets on your own website. So you guys have been to websites, I'm sure, where you see like a Facebook like button in the middle of a website. And when that happens, that's not just a link taking you to someone's Facebook page, or it shouldn't be. It should actually be a place where you can actually like something on their website, and that'll register on their Facebook account. So some of the API stuff may be about that sort of thing. So when it talks about setting up widgets and so on, then that's probably not what you're looking for. Although I could be wrong about some of it. I would start up in here and maybe take a look at the reference index and see what you got. And the example I showed you before, I think I showed you, is for Reddit. And this is another one of the simpler ones out there, although it's kind of boring in a way. But you can go to any subreddit. So like oh yeah, I showed you guys. So I went to politics, which is always entertaining. And then if you just remove the last slash and go to politics.json, you can do this on any of their, actually on any page. It doesn't have to be from the home page of a subreddit. You can go to any like discussion and you can get a JSON of that as well. But like if I wanted to use this for my app and pull in content from Reddit, you may notice that I don't even need an API key for this one. Like this is like probably the only major one I've seen where I could actually get data for them without even sending any kind of credentials at all. All I have to do is know that, yeah, I can get to these guys by going to the JSON file for each of these pages. So the downside of this, as we talked about before, is that this is static content, right? It's not going to do live updates on my website. Someone would have to refresh the page on my website in order to see an update on this data that's being pulled in. But this would be like flat out the easiest one that you can make use of here, where you can like parse through the data structure like right here on their page to find out what you would need to do in order to get like the text. Okay, self-text. And that is a property of the data property, which is of children, which is property of another data, right? You just go right down the chain and figure out what it is that you need to loop through in order to call out different sections of this into your own app. So I said this is one of the easiest ones in terms of grabbing the data, but actually this is not the easiest structure in the world. It goes several levels deep. Most of them will be a little bit simpler than this in that way. So that's another example. I think we used the example of looking for like the Magic the Gathering API. And here it is, MTG API docs from Gathering and .io. Okay, so it's showing what the URL needs to look like if you want to call in like cards, which is probably what most people would want to do to get card titles and so on and so forth. That's your URL. Now they're giving you some pretty extensive documentation about exactly what sort of stuff you can look for here. Let's see, developer SDKs. This is where you will check out like, okay, JavaScript SDK. And this should give you some, this is, sometimes they show examples like through Node, which we haven't really gone into yet. Yeah, that's kind of unfortunate. But you know what? Actually, you can do it without that, I'm sure. Let's go to getting started. Okay, so here is their JSON object and what the structure looks like. So I don't know. I mean, basically, I would have to give this a try. I would have to go through and pour through some of the examples, try to find some like JavaScript examples that did not involve me using NPM. Although you guys now have NPM, so actually, if you wanted to, it wouldn't be difficult for you to like do it through this method instead, because you just installed NPM on your machines like this last Monday. And then you could do this NPM install and go through all this stuff if you wanted to. But I bet they've got a way where you can do it without going through Node and that whole business. So basically, I mean, you try to find what it is that you're interested in doing your project on, which you guys should have that ready for today. And you should have already looked to see if it at least has an API that you can locate and that you can get an API key for without paying for it. And then if you can't, then you might need to switch to a slightly different topic or what have you. Now it's time for you to dig through here and see if you can figure out how to get the content exposed through JavaScript by using fetch and running it through the server like we did, just in this example just now. And if you cannot figure out a way to do it, then enlist my help. And then if together we can't figure it out, then it's time to plan something else. I mean, worst case scenario, you spend a couple of days trying to get something to work and it doesn't work, you're a little bit behind, and you just say, well, screw it, I'm just going to do the News API. So that's like worst case. I'm not expecting anyone to want to do the News API, but if you do, then, you can get away with it. It just won't be very interesting. So that's like worst case scenario. I think I'm going to spend a little time with this one, and if I have time, and see if I can get this thing working here, because it's very intriguing, but I'm not seeing like immediately how to get it working. Like, where do I find my API key? Let's see. Right, okay, so let's pull from here. Right. You know what, the first thing I'm going to do, since I'm not seeing any reference to an API key anywhere, I'm just going to try to grab it without an API key and see if I can get it that way. That would be pretty cool. If I can, I'm going to start like checking this out right now, actually. I won't share screen or anything, but if I can get it working, I'll definitely let you guys know, because based on projects from other classes that I've taught, Magic the Gathering is a popular thing to do for a project. So let me go ahead and just stop the recording here. Before I do, let's just take a look here real quick. Boy, I've got all kinds of stuff open now. Let's see. There's the front-end class. So classwork, week 4 is where we're at now, crazily. Project, API fetch. So this is what you want to do for Friday. Today's Wednesday, right? So get an API key from your chosen data source, and a plain HTML file, use fetch to loop through your data, choosing content from the property names. You guys know what I mean by that now, right? You spit out the results to the console, open it up, and see if you can identify property names that you can actually use for your interface. And then write a simple template string like we did tonight. We did 2 of them. Inside your fetch loop that outputs your data to the HTML page. And on Friday, for the Friday lab, we will switch gears. So on Monday, we got introduced to Vue.js very quickly. And today, you got introduced to accessing data from third-party APIs. And on Friday, we're going to bring the two together. So you will use view. You'll put your fetch call into the view data object, and then use view in order to loop through declaratively on the page. It's actually going to be simpler than what we just did. It's not going to be a problem. So we'll do that on Friday. Next week, we'll be tightening everything up over the week and applying CSS and making things happy, and then that'll be it. So let me go ahead and stop the recording now.